Welcome to another This Week in Coworking discussion.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the This Week in Coworking podcast feed. I am Hector Kolonas, your host, and this is your weekly recap for week 29 of 2026. Today, I'm joined by an amazing guest co-host, Adam Morgan. Adam, how are you?
Hey Hector, how you going, mate? Good to be here.
I've been hanging out with you in person at our coffees, been crossing paths with you online for a while now. You've got an Aussie accent, but you're based in New York right now, right, Adam?
Yeah, clearly not from the US, or as I like to say, from a little bit further south than the deep south. But yeah, from Australia originally, and have been in New York for the last 12 months or so. So second stint in the big city. It's hard to stay away. But yeah, Hector, great to be part of it. It's an awesome group you've been pulling together in the co-working community.
Thank you for joining me here on the podcast. You are the founder at a company called Bureau. We'll dive into exactly what that is in a second. But I know as soon as I say that, people are going to be like, well, how do I spell that so I can Google him? It will be in the show notes. But also, if you head over to the co-working words word search game that we've got this week, one of the words is Bureau. So by the end of this week, I hope we'll all be able to spell it correctly and you'll be able to ping Adam an email without mistyping the name.
Yeah, if you guys need any clues on that one as well, it's just like the FBI. Everyone knows what the FBI is in the US, so just use that as a bit of your guide. Hopefully that's not a discredit to the brand.
I love the fact that people are going to be like using that in the good word search to try and figure out, how do I spell this? Oh yeah, FBI.
Perfect.
So we've got a very jam-packed newsletter this week. I think it was about 20-something items that I sent out to folks. We've picked a few before we dived into recording that we're going to discuss today. We're going to look at things like what happens to the Airbnbs for workspaces if Airbnb comes to play. We're going to look at two different ways to assess co-working spaces, one financial, one cultural. We're also going to look at this idea of what people are doing, creative things that people are doing for using co-working spaces or leveraging and monetizing co-working spaces after hours. And then we're going to dive into a little bit of a discussion about fractional offices or part-time offices, based on the fact that after the email went out, a whole bunch of folks emailed me and they're like, we know you talked about fractional offices 2 years ago. How does it all work? So Adam and I are going to dive into that.
100%, let's go.
Great. So the first story that was on everyone's radar this week was the fact that Airbnb has started adding day passes for a select number of partners in the UK, allowing their customers or app users to book day passes, i.e. work experiences at co-working spaces across London. This set off alarm bells for two different sets of sectors of our industry. One, operators were like, well, this is another distribution channel for us. It's another way for us to get marketing, but also to start engaging people who may be passing through the town as opposed to being there full time. And the other side, people who were building the Airbnbs for workspaces. But Adam, what are your thoughts? Do you think that this is the, red alarm that everyone should be concerned about, or is this a good thing for the industry?
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. I think it's initially also picking Kindling and Worklife as like launch partners for it. I think it's been a really good move for them, very design forward products in great positions as well across the UK around that sort of King's Cross area. I think this is a net great thing for people getting more exposure to flexible office opportunities, and with a huge installed customer base through Airbnb, I think it's a net positive for the demand side of it, which obviously, as we know in co-working, can be both beneficial and also a bit of a curse as well if you can't plan around it properly. But I think it's a net great thing. Whether Airbnb deliver it in a really good way will be interesting as well to see. Like, remember when they did the like host experiences piece of it? The first few times that launched out, I think it was a bit of a flop. I've actually Chesky's focused on expanding out a lot of these other verticals, with this obviously being a key piece of it. I think it fits into the bigger movement of how does work fit into life, fit into people being more flexible, both with work schedules, but also traveling around. So I think it's a net positive thing.
I agree with you there. And it's interesting to kind of zoom in on Airbnb as a company. Just like Uber, just like a few others, they're definitely trying to build a super app, right? They started with when you travel, they started with the experiences. As you mentioned, it's not their first time. It wasn't their first time. They didn't nail it the first time they rolled out host experiences. This is not their first foray into booking workspaces. If you remember over the summer, 2 summers ago, they did a workation program and with a bunch of digital nomad locations around the world. So they've started experimenting with this. And I have had conversations with a lot of the aggregator companies saying at some point they are going to look at this industry as another way to monetize. They've already made deals with Uber for pickups via the Airbnb app. They've made deals with hotels. They've made deals with experiences. They've made deals with reservations now. So they are increasingly becoming or aiming to become that super app that we don't really have yet here in the Western world. Very popular out in China and in APAC to have these super apps where you do everything in. Airbnb is definitely running along those rails.
Yeah, I think that in itself is a pretty exciting proposition. Like you look at there's probably 5 apps that you use on your phone, right? Most commonly, like Uber, potentially Airbnb if you move around a lot. You're probably like your banking app or like a Venmo or something, Google Maps. And then there's a lot of fluff like Instagram or whatever your social media one is. So I think it will be interesting to see how that lands, especially with things around like payment controls and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's an exciting bit of news.
I definitely agree. And it's interesting to see how, if at all, it will evolve from selling day passes, which is a kind of commodity product, to actually implementing the rails to do meeting room bookings, to do offsites, to do the other things that are actually money making, as opposed to just selling a day pass, which is where they are right now. So definitely a developing story. We'll keep an eye on it. We didn't get any comment from anyone at Airbnb, so we'll just keep monitoring it from the outside and see how it works with the partners who have made it public that they're part of this program.
I think it'd be interesting to see like what of the audience of this podcast as well, like who as a co-working operator would take Airbnb on, like what impacts may that have? I wonder what the terms are around like pricing or availability that they require from your end of it and what those deals are actually like.
So anyone who can talk publicly about it, because I'm pretty sure there's going to be a bunch of NDAs around this rollout. But if you can, do definitely drop me an email or write a public post that I can then share with the newsletter, because I would also be kind of curious to see what are the financial terms, but also do we think this is going to be as big as a disruption as when we started letting corporate teams book out larger swaths of co-working spaces, right? Everyone was like, it's a great moneymaker. It was right after COVID. It was an absolute no-brainer. But then you get into this conversation around, who impacts the culture of the space if 80% of your members are from one company, right?
Yep.
There was a lot of secondary effects because of that change. So I'd be curious, just like you mentioned, to see what these more nomadic travelers or nomadic members, how they would impact the makeup or the fabric of the space.
And that's a really interesting point as well. I think this is like, it's not a all is equal on the other side of it, right? It's not an apples for apples thing. Like, as you're saying before, with that, the corporate side of it probably fits in well with those co-working that are actually more flex spaces than co-working spaces, but they call themselves a co-working space. And they've got, it's a lot of private suites in a very small kind of communal area. And so, whether they're directing it into that way, or if it is more that nomadic piece that you were just talking about before, where there's almost no private offices, like maybe there's a couple of like single person private offices, but 70% of the floor plate is true co-working open desks.
Yeah, I think that is really interesting. But also, like, while you were talking, I was remembering that they're selling one type of product and assuming it's a catch-all for everyone, right? For folks who've been in this industry long enough, they know that someone booking a co-working space has an outcome in mind, right? They either need a focus area. They either need somewhere where they can network. They need somewhere where they can just land and have a quick call. They may need privacy. They may not want privacy. Like, all of that is really hard to build filters around, so much so that even the aggregators who have been in this space for 10 plus years haven't really nailed the filtering around which space is good for what. So I would be curious, on the flip side of that, to take a more pessimistic approach, is could you get people coming in expecting kombucha on tap, parties, ping pong tables, and finding something a little bit quiet, a little bit more formal, a little bit more relaxed, if it's not presented in the right way on a platform you don't really have control over. So definitely we'll keep an eye on that. I'm very excited. I do want to discuss this with leaders in New York. We mentioned at the top of this call that Adam and I met a few times at our co-working leaders coffee that we host here in New York. The next one is actually next Friday the 25th of July in Nomad, I believe, at the Marlin. Hop over to twig.co/coffee. I think we have a couple of seats still available. So grab those. Adam and I will definitely be discussing this with the room next week, Friday. so long as Adam doesn't buy IWG between now and then, this should be one of the big stories we discuss at that roundtable. From that laugh, I'm assuming that I've just outed your secret plans to acquire IWG.
I was like, oh, yeah, Mark Dixon, watch out, it's happening.
Well, you heard it here first. So I want to dive into the next set of articles. It was actually two very different articles in our news section this week. One from a lawyer who was advising firms to really assess the financial difference between a flex office and a traditional lease. And on the flip side, we had a post from Gina at the Village Workspace who really looked at the difference between building a space or community where people belong or people fit in. Now, you're probably wondering, Hector, why you're combining two very different articles. And it does come down to this fact of we have to design spaces that make sense financially, but also give people what they need from a space outside of desk Wi-Fi and, not being rained on. So It's a really interesting approach. Now, the reason why I want to merge them together and ask you about this, Adam, is yes, you do build products for the co-working and office industry, but you also have offices around the world. How many locations do you guys have offices in right now?
We've got about seven offices. One is a lease in our London Clerkenwell office. It's a sort of street frontage, half office, half kind of product showroom space, and then all of the others are in a office suite within a co-working space, and then we usually partner with them with the fitting out of the actual co-working area. So we've got a bit of a mix, and this is a really interesting discussion around the all-in costs of everything as well. I think with that original lease piece of it, there is, especially with growing businesses in that sort of small to medium, mid-market sized businesses, they're growing up to 50 to 100 staff, especially if they're very dispersed across a lot of regions. Managing the flex side of it, it's all about picking the timing of when I feel like when you reach the maturity of it, bringing more benefit. Mm-hmm. Because if you've got 2 or 3 people in a Vancouver or Toronto, and then 7 other different major cities, you don't necessarily need to. You're overcooking it if you get a lease in those places, and also potentially if you get an office suite. But then the second that gets to sort of 6, 7, 10 people in some of these areas, you can't really have them taking up like a whole table of desks in a co-working space. It also starts impacting team morale as well. So where we've sort of done this trade-off is as that gets to mass in certain key areas, we've kind of picked them as major hubs for us. And there's kind of a threshold that those teams get to when it's like, okay, now we can start considering an actual lease for that team. It's evolved from a satellite team to now one of our what we call hubs. Yep. And the hubs, they're the only ones that have the option of either staying in an office suite in a co-working space, depending on where it is, or taking out an actual lease.
Interesting. And since given that for most of your career, you've been in charge of the revenue, you look at the numbers, what is the deciding factor for yourself, but also for the teams when it comes to why do they choose a leased option, or why do they choose a suite? Is it purely financial, or is there something else there that the team gets to decide, or is it purely numbers?
It does get guided a lot in scaling businesses, depending on, there's a couple of other factors, like, are you well funded? Like, are you figuring your go-to-market out still? Are you a profitable business? All these things kind of affect the ability that you have budget-wise. But then I also think depending on the product or how you're trying to interact with your customers, it also impacts the type of space that you're in. So if you just need a space for your team to be in all the time, there's a lot of sort of devs in the team maybe, or you've got a lot of sort of desktop work getting done, I think that impacts the decision fairly materially, versus if you're a very sales and marketing forward organization where you've got clients coming in all the time, you host events in the space maybe. Some of these other factors can also then impact, okay, well, maybe actually, yes, if we had our own lease, it's great because we could set up, like a nice boardroom or a nice presentation space. It's easy for us to host events in there, but we may not necessarily have all of the like amenity setups done, versus, okay, great, well, if we're in a high quality flex operator or co-working space that has our office in New York is in Spring Place, which has a restaurant. It has huge event spaces in it. It has sort of viewing rooms. and then it has our product as a physical sort of piece of hardware. It's in amongst the co-working area, so it's all getting used all the time by people. So it's actually a pretty good benefit to us to be a big part of the community and the members here as well. They all interact with the product every day. We can get really good customer feedback. When we have events and stuff on, there's this big sort of community of people that are really interesting. You bring clients through and they're meeting people that are starting great businesses. Sometimes they end up linking up and it can be a good sort of business development for them as well. So I think there's a couple of these sort of peripheral value adds that people discount off co-working and flex spaces in a trade-off for that lack of really being able to control their own space. So I think there's definitely a financial driver that can get influenced by how your business is set up. But I also think some of those cultural value adds that are a bit more like qualitative, a bit harder to put an actual number on, can actually drive a lot of benefit for being in co-working and flex operators. I absolutely love the energy of the co-working flex side of things. It's really where we get the best out of a lot of our people.
That's awesome. I mean, before I dive into like the belonging side and the difference between fitting in and belonging, we did mention that your products are physical products. We haven't actually told anyone. Maybe they haven't heard of Bureau because they don't know how to spell it, or any other reason because it's a very competitive market. It's very noisy in co-working right now. What is Bureau's main product and who is it for?
So we're all about bringing modular into the mainstream. So we basically set out to change the future of how workspaces are not only being designed, but also how people are being able to have flexibility as their businesses grow. Real problem statement of any organization is a fluid being, right? Like capital comes in, you hire 50 people, or a new initiative starts taking track, your teams start changing the way that they're working. And traditionally it's all been in a fixed, boxed, built wall environment. And so in order to change that, you got to rip walls down, rebuild them, time, cost, disruption to your team. That was kind of the big sort of core problem. So have a range of modular walled office solutions, so office pods all the way up to conference rooms and meeting spaces. We also do a lot of the design recommendations for spaces as well, so using a lot of our customer data to help actually prove out these spaces work better for certain customers. This is where you'll get good utilization and help try and influence the way that those spaces are being designed. So the whole sort of problem that we set out to do is really to bring flexibility into spaces. And so the co-working and flex industry has been so close to our heart because there is so much change. There's so much movement in it all the time. You know, operators are trying to figure out how they can monetize better sometimes, or at least replan their spaces in a better way. Like how do we create a win-win for this industry, both for landlords, operators of flex spaces, and even the end tenants to get the best out of their workforces and teams. So we really design and create our products to try and solve the problem across the whole ecosystem.
And we did mention in the newsletter, there's links both in the notes below and the newsletter to kind of learn more about how you do make workspaces more flexible using these pods, using this modular shift. One of the things you did mention is that the space does change a lot. Like what does it actually take to move one of your pods compared to, let's say, tearing down a wall? Like what does that look like in reality?
Yeah, so we based on our data of fitting out spaces over the last 6 years, we're sort of 50% faster than doing anything, a full traditional fit out of a build, depending on the scale of it. However, once that full build and fit out is done, the movability, all of our products have caster roller feet underneath them, so you can basically slide them across a floor plate as long as you have an even floor, which again I know that is not every workspace is created equal. But also pack down and set up is kind of an hour and a half on each side of that, so they can be fully dispersed, packed down, reshaped, moved up floors, moved down floors, moved into different rooms. So it really does truly give you an asset that you can continue to use to evolve the space. You've taken a lease that you actually only ended up needing half of, so you want to sublease out the other half of it. How do you bring the meeting room functionality of that half of the space into the space you actually want to use? You don't have to rip walls down and rebuild. You don't have to go through all of the certifications, the replanning of fire services, other bits and pieces. So it's a huge asset for truly being able to be flexible.
I love that. I know a lot of the folks in Europe right now are going to ask one question, like, is it air conditioned? Is it cool inside? I mean, Europe's having a crazy heat wave right now. The last thing they want to do is put their members inside of a glass box inside of an office. Like, what have you guys done regarding like the ventilation and like the cooling within these pods?
Yeah, and that heat wave does sound absolutely. I feel like it's bad in New York for us right now, Hector, but it's
Yes.
definitely a shocker in the UK and Europe. But they, by design, we have a ventilation system in them that basically draws through all the ambient air from outside. So as long as your office space is air conditioned, you don't have to port new air conditioning into them. It's all self-contained in the ceiling, clears the entire air volume of the booth every sort of minute, and that allows it to refresh and change. And it's all tracked on sensors as well. So you exit the booth, all the ventilation stays on to clear out all the air over the next however many minutes before someone else books it to then come in. Sensor goes off, so all the power shuts down, so you're then saving the energy side of it, and then the second somebody else comes back in, bang, it all turns back on again. So really conscious about making sure that the comfort side of it's everything, right? Like no one wants to sit in a stuffy box. And I'm sure everybody that listens to this podcast and reads the newsletter has been into a lot of spaces where people have sort of built in their own phone booths and to varying levels of success. So what we're trying to do is standardize it and make it a productized tool for co-working spaces, flex offices, and end tenants to not have to worry about all that stuff. All you got to do is plug it into the wall like a laptop, and then you're ready to go.
So if you do want to meet us, it'll be on Friday morning, the 25th. So you can talk more about the pods and how they work with Adam. Adam, I want to take it back.
Free coffee for everyone. So
yes, there we go. Free coffee and co-working geekery that you probably can't talk about with your colleagues because like we're going to get really deep into it, right? Caffeinated and co-working chat. That's what we're going to do for a 2-hour meetup, and everyone gets back to their Friday. Hopefully we'll have better visibility by then when we won't have to walk through smoke to get there. But people got there in a typhoon last time. I'm pretty sure we can rely on the co-working leaders getting to this meetup. I want to kick it back to the other side of the conversation where Gina was talking about the difference between creating somewhere that is for somewhere where you feel like you belong and somewhere where you have to fit in. It was a very interesting way to look at it. I know this also caught your attention. What was your takeaway as someone who is in the industry but also has to choose spaces?
Yeah, I think this one's really interesting because I think that like belonging side of it, you were starting to see with this huge uptick in flex and co-working being a preferred method of office choices for a lot of businesses. Because that supply is starting to build up, we're starting to see a lot of brands and operators go down niches as well, which I think really fits into this conversation around that fitting in and belonging piece of it. There's a lot of great operators that are more down the art side of things. So they've got recording studios, they've got areas for photo shoots, other bits and pieces down that vertical. So those creative types can go in there, they're protective of the brand, they're protective of, I think now that the demand has risen for these types of spaces, they don't feel like they're cutting themselves off from enough users to be able to survive by going down these niches. So I think that's having a great sort of flywheel effect on these brands being able to be a really strong cultural build for those areas. Because as you said at the top of the podcast, you don't necessarily want a cool media agency or creative coming in and then having a KPMG's like spillover coming in and taking up half the office as well. No shade on KPMG. Yeah. I used to work there. It's a great business. But, so this sense of belonging, I feel like it is really important, is the key piece of this. And people want to start feeling connected to where they go into their sort of third space, being the office. And it elevates that when the actual brand that's running that flex or co-working space is actually committing to that vertical or committing to that specialization, whether it is, seed funded tech startups that are all chasing funding, getting really innovative with their ideas, a bit more scrappy. So, they don't necessarily care about the design-led steel that's used to shape the staircase that goes up the middle of the floor plate. They just want to have a great area with whiteboards everywhere, like digital screens, desks all around themselves so they can collaborate, a fridge to put all their Red Bulls and selfies or whatever they are. And so I think this belonging and focus piece of it is really becoming not only just like a nice to have that people talk about, but people can actually do it now and still keep their space alive.
Yeah.
Because it's hard sometimes to lean into that when you're like, well, it'd be great to be able to stick to this brand idea that I initially had. However, I need to make sure I get enough desks filled to stay alive.
Yeah. And that goes back to, more channels, more ways to promote yourself, more ways to find partners is just another really good way to allow you to get enough volume that you can choose who belongs in your space. I do love the fact you point out the fact that because the volume is going up, it does make it more likely that you can focus and niche down to build the community that you want to run. On that, there is another piece that we saw about Ollie Kingshot over in the UK. He spun a project out of Hulken offices called Night Office, where they essentially rent out co-working spaces to host events and working sessions after hours. So after 6 p.m., when the traditional members leave, they come in and take over the space and fill that. They've had over 10,000 people use them since March and have now seen such a great success from it that they're now rolling it out as a standalone entity and are looking for more operators to partner with. It's a fascinating way to think about utilization of space. So, especially given the fact that co-working space initially was to help leverage underutilized space, we're now seeing like a second order effect where the underutilized co-working space, which was underutilized office space, is now being utilized in the evenings and the weekends by a secondary market, which is just a fascinating thing to see. It's something I did call a few years back. I actually registered a domain called Sundown Startup, trying to figure out how can I monetize that dead time. Never really pulled the trigger on it, but it was definitely something I looked into. So I'm excited to see this kicking off. But it's a really interesting way to add another SKU or another product to the co-working product lineup. But it's not something completely new. So I do want to highlight that. I do know there's a lot of operators who do offer evening passes. They do offer study passes over the weekend for like students. They offer accounting packages to accountants who need to come in and work really hectic for 2 months of the year, right? And so it's not completely new, but to see a platform purely focus on this is awesome. So I'm excited to see how it rolls out. Would you use this if even in your leased space, for example, if you were like, we're not using it after 6?
Yeah, I think this is incredible. It's a great utilization play. Anything that operators can do to increase people coming through, increase monetization in downtime. I feel like there's a bunch of the really good co-working brands are getting a lot of demand for events as well. Like a lot of these corporates and a lot of these bigger, innovative, well-funded businesses, they're putting events on all the time. And again, not to where down in Spring Place, down in Tribeca, half the building is an event space, and they have incredible events here, from Tribeca Film Festival all the way through to I think there's a huge amount of opportunity in this. I remember the guys down at the Malin, even across New York, renting floors out for these big events. There's the rooftop they have at the Soho space, like renting that out for parties over summer. It's amazing. It's an incredible way for these guys to get great businesses and brands together to continue to push the brand out of how they're helping fuel work events, but just business in general, and this sort of third place for people to connect and communities. I think that's a huge win. I think what they've done with this Night Office is incredible. As you said, not necessarily like a new idea, but starting to just push more into it and bring more awareness to it. I think it's fantastic. Like, they've been doing World Cup watch parties here after work for some of the games, which has been awesome. So I think that it's just a win for the space. The more we can drive utilization would be great. Like, imagine if your co-working space has like a karaoke championship or something once a month after work.
Yep.
I think the more innovative that people can get with utilizing that space after hours, it's a no-brainer. As you said, it's not necessarily like the newest idea ever, but I think if people can start trying to funnel some more awareness and demand into it, it'll start becoming an option for people.
I love that. And you did mention that it's an innovative way to leverage the space and to monetize the space in a slightly different way, which does bring us to the last thing we're going to discuss this week. We saw Jamie Russo do a little bit of a deep dive into what she calls part-time offices, what I call fractional offices. This is the idea of, sharing an office between Company A and Company B. Company A uses it on Monday and Tuesday. Company B uses it Thursday and Friday. And then on the Wednesday, you rent it out as a day office. This is something I've been talking about and exploring since about 2 years ago. Highlighted some success stories, how it's been platformed and kind of monetized and productized over in the UK, Australia, a few other places. We looked at whether it was running into some roadblocks here in the US. But since I sent the newsletter out this morning, which was like 4-ish hours ago now at recording time, to kind of break the fourth wall, what we what happened is I got a bunch of emails from operators who are like, we keep hearing about this, we keep seeing the success metrics, we can't figure out exactly how it works. And so I want to take a couple of minutes with you, Adam, now just kind of run through that, because I'm pretty sure this is not something that you thought a lot about as kind of the modeling side of it. But since I've done a lot of work with operators on this from the sync route side of my life, I want to just dive into that a little bit.
It's kind of like room sharing in an apartment, right? Like obviously you're swapping out the full days of it. So there's probably some like operational things to consider around how you make sure, like, does it have to be a fully sterile exit at the end, right? Like, is everything cleared out of the fridge or the kitchen area? Does it work better as a suite in a flex space or a co-working area, or does it work better on a lease type program where it's the actual full office? Like, that'd be really interesting to see how those kind of work and what operators see to be challenging. Like, we've got in our Vancouver office, which is also a leased office too, we've actually got it's less sort of fractional, but there's a few groups that come in once a month and they take the boardroom and they do their like monthly connect, because they're a fully remote business, but they come into the office and just literally just use the boardroom for 2 days.
On-site, yeah.
So again, not fully fractional, but it's kind of like you're just helping utilize dead areas as you move through.
It's really interesting because the principle is fairly straightforward. There's two challenges. The operational side, how do you clear out the space? How do you kind of make sure that it's ready for the next person to use it? And the other is, how do you price this thing, right? Because it's like, do you charge a premium? Do you not? Do you charge less? So we'll start with this kind of operational side. What I always recommend to operators is, if you are renting out meeting rooms, day offices, booths like bureaus, by the hour, by the day, you're already halfway there. It is the same principle. You're just instead of renting it on demand, you're renting it on a subscription. So you're saying you always come in on Monday, and you always think of like a restaurant. I always want my table, right? I'm going to come in every Monday. It's going to be my table. It's reserved for me at this time. I'm not saying I'm posh enough to have ever done that, but
I was going to say, just for everyone listening to the podcast, Hector's a big deal in New York. You got to watch out.
I've never been able to do that, but it's a similar concept, right? You know that the customer is going to come in every Monday or every second Monday or Monday and Thursday, and you position them a proposal where, okay, we know you're coming in and you're spending X amount per day. What if instead we just make it a monthly fee, and those days are automatically reserved for you? That is fundamentally the easiest way to implement it. But then everyone's like, oh, what about, how do I matchmake? Well, then you don't worry about the other days. You just rent them as day offices. So if you're renting out one of the conference booths, for example, from Bureau, on Monday and Thursday, it's a reserve for someone already. But the other days, you can book it as a member, you can book it as an external person, and you spot those patterns again, that someone keeps coming in, or you upsell them. Like, hey, we've seen you come in once a month. Is it price prohibitive? If it is price prohibitive, what if we make it the same price per week, but you get 2 days? So you kind of block it out that way, and it becomes more of a sales exercise than an operational exercise, because now you're generating 3 subscriptions from one asset, which
I actually love that. Like, I think that's in that co-working, or like for the suites in your co-working space, or if you're a flex operator, I think that's incredible, because a lot of businesses are 3 days, and so you may have trouble on the Monday, Friday of how you get that one done. But I think you can offer a premium for that, because it's true flexibility, right?
Yep.
So let's say it's our 10-person office suite here, and we only want it Monday through Friday, or vice versa. You can kind of match make those up and actually get an overall aggregate higher lease value. You sign 2 leases anyway to the space, and whether you make them monthly or 6 monthly, whatever that may be, you're offering a true flexibility benefit to a team that's too big to be on flex desks, but is too small to take their own space, or they don't want to take that financial piece of it. So again, there's the admin side of it that may be slightly a bit more arduous to do, but you could basically double your floor print, because you can lease out, you can double lease your suites.
Yeah. I mean, so we did see back 2 years ago, the premium compared to a flat monthly fee was about 30% premium on the office, because you can aggressively price it that, okay, you can't afford 7 days a week because people pay for weekends when they rent an office. I'm only going to give it for you for 3 days. So you can take that 7 divided by 3, maybe even put a premium on it, because they're not paying for the full 7 days. They're still paying you more than they would have on the hot desk or another product, and you've locked in a subscription. So pricing is a really interesting thing to explore. And that brings me to the last thing I do want to share this week is on Monday, July 20th, I'm dropping my next Undercurrents deep dive, which is exploring the impact, pros and cons of dynamic pricing in co-working. And I bring that up now because if you are using or tracking the data around pricing, you can start being really creative with products like fractional offices because you know exactly what your day's worth, your day's value is of your assets or your specific meeting rooms. But I also dig into this idea that all of our assets, all of our bookable resources they're perishable. At the end of the day, that product is gone. It is not like a chair that you can put back into the store next week or a pod that you can sell again next week if no one buys it this week. If no one books your meeting room today or no one books that office today, that asset is gone. You cannot resell it. We're selling time, not space. And so that is something that you're going to hear a lot about that on Monday in the deep dive.
It's cool because we've actually started rolling out an MVP of set of sensors in all of our products, both occupancy through thermal, but also CO2 levels, airflow, other bits and pieces for comfort and utilization. But that if you fold that into dynamic pricing and you can start dictating people's meeting habits, right? Like if I'm in a co-working space and I book my weekly kickoff meeting with my team at 11, and that makes me book out the biggest meeting room in the co-working space that costs me $100 for the hour, $60 for the hour, whatever it is. Then I see, if I actually do that meeting at 9 a.m. in the same room with dynamic pricing, because it never gets used at 9 a.m., I can literally pay a third of that. Great, I'm just going to shuffle that weekly meeting to match the dynamic pricing utilization. That's fantastic.
And that's definitely one of the topics we do dig into. We've got experts from around the world kind of give their feedback on how they use that dynamic pricing. And this was one of them, is shifting that demand, changing the buying behavior so that your members can still access the resources that they want, but you're also fairly monetizing the rest of it. But also dive into like the cons of that, like how much personalization and dynamic pricing is too much, right? So definitely look out for that. It'll be in your podcast feed on Monday. Adam, thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to hanging out with you next Friday, July 25th over in Manhattan. Anything you want to tell people before we hop out this week?
Thanks for having me, Hector. It's always great to connect and looking forward to seeing you next week. If anyone else wants to come join, do reach out to Hector. Love what you're doing in the space, and I think it's going to be a really exciting back half of 26 and 27 for the co-working and flex operators out there.
I completely agree, and I cannot wait to ride that wave with all of you. Till next time, take care, everybody.
See you, mate.